Hey everyone, this is KJ, and I'm here to give you a draft analysis of my team, the San Francisco Arcaniners, that I drafted this weekend in the TBA Season 3 Majors Draft. For those of you that aren't familiar with what Pokemon Draft League is, it's very similar to fantasy sports. Almost all of the Pokemon are placed into a draft pool, separated into tiers, or given a point value based on their viability, sort of how well they stack up against other Pokemon, and sort of how they set the metagame. The Pokemon that are considered like the box art legendaries, I should say, the Pokemon that have like ridiculous base stats are typically banned from these drafts, and so those are the only mons that you won't find in this draft pool. So there's a draft order that's usually randomized, and then you have X number of coaches picking Pokemon to sort of fit guidelines for their teams. So it's kind of important to note that these drafts are usually serpentine drafts. So pick 1 through pick N goes, and then pick N in the second round will have the first pick. So in this particular case, for the TBA draft that I was in, there were 20 coaches. So pick 1 through 20 went, and then for round 1, and then round 2, pick 20 became pick number 1. The person picking it, pick 20 became number 1. So then they would go back. So they have like a wheel pick, they call it. So they get 2 picks back to back. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, the coaches end up picking to sort of fit whatever guidelines for that are set for the league. And so typically those guidelines are either point based, where you get a certain number of points. So say you get 100 points, and then you have to take X number of Pokemon with those 100 points, or they're tier based, where it's like you have to take X number of Pokemon from each tier, and then typically there's a Mega that you can take, and then there's some number of free slots that you can take where you can take any tier mon. So the TBA is the latter. So we had to take one of every tier. So tier 1 through tier 5, except for tier 3. We get 2 tier 3s. And then we take a Mega, and then we get 4 free slots. So the catch with the free slots is that you can't exceed more than 400 points in total. So each tier has their own point value. So like tier 1 is worth 180 points, tier 2, 120, tier 3, 100, tier 4, 60, and tier 5 is 40. So you just have to basically mix and match to make sure that you don't exceed 400 points. The interesting thing is you can actually get more than 400 points depending on what tier Mega you take. So there's 3 different tiers of Megas in this draft. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 Megas, and tier 2 and tier 3 Megas actually give you points. So tier 2 gives you 40 points, tier 3 gives you 60 points. And you'll kind of get to see later on how this works, as I did take a tier 3 Mega. So yeah, after the draft, you have a regular season, schedule is generated, and then every week you sort of battle whoever's up on your schedule. This process is pretty interesting because like you schedule with the opponent, and then you are prepping for them. And so what makes it interesting is that every team has more than 6 Pokemon, typically 11 or 12. In this case, 11. But they can only bring 6 to the battle. And so you're kind of trying to put all of the pieces to the puzzle together to try to see like, okay, what's my win condition? What kind of things do I expect that they're going to bring? I mean, the ideal situation is like you want to make sure that you're prepared for their entire team, but you also want to try to see like, oh, this thing is very obviously a threat to my team, so I want to make sure that I can counter that. And so it's really interesting. It's a lot of mind games. It's a lot of fun. And then after prepping and when the time comes, you battle, which is also a lot of fun. So yeah, so after the regular season's over, then there's playoffs, just like sort of any other league competition, etc. And it's run the exact same way. It's single elimination, and you basically just, whoever you match up with in the playoffs, you schedule a time, prep, and then battle. So, and all of this is done on Pokemon Showdown, which is a Pokemon simulator. So yeah, that's kind of the draft format in a nutshell. I'll talk a little bit about TBA. So TBA, I've been part of TBA for this is the 3rd season. I've been a part since midway through the 1st season. It was one of my first draft leagues, and so that was really exciting. I didn't actually get to draft my team season 1, and so I was basically a replacement coach, and then season 2, I was there for the draft, got to actually pick my team, had a lot of fun with that team. That was really great, and I actually became an admin. They asked me to join the admin team, so that's been a lot of fun, and it's been really exciting being able to contribute there. But yeah, TBA is just it's a great community, and there's tons and tons of talent. Like there's a majors draft and like a minors draft, and so like it's honestly it's so hard to distinguish the talent between the two. Like there's so many great coaches, and so this TBA majors draft is 20 coaches. I think I mentioned that earlier, and I'm lucky to be one of those 20, so that's fun. Yeah, so let's get into the draft. Why not? So going in, I knew that I had picked 13, and so I wasn't going to be able to get any of like the super overpowered stuff. Like I figured most of the Tapus would be gone. Just a lot of stuff that people draft first or draft very early in draft leagues I figured would be gone, and especially because like most draft leagues are either 12 or 16 people, and so with this being 20, I figured that the pool was going to be even thinner. So when I sat down and like made my rough draft plan, I figured the chances are I'm not going to get all of the things I want here, but I know that I might be able to get some of it as long as my expectations are realistic. So two Pokemon that I really was interested in building around were Jirachi and Victini. So I was like, okay, if I can get one of these two in the first round with pick 13, I'll be pretty happy. I was leaning towards Victini, and I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. So unfortunately, Victini went the pick before me. However, Jirachi was still on the board, so as you'll see, Jirachi was my first pick. So Jirachi sort of brought a lot of interesting and very useful things to the table. Jirachi is Steel Psychic type, which means that it fits the role of the Steel type in the Fairy Dragon Steel Core, which is a common core for any draft team. So that was nice. It has access to Stealth Rocks, which having the ability to set hazards is always great in singles. It also has Wish support, so I was able to basically say, okay, like now I have I have the ability to Wish Pass. That's reliable recovery, so that was good. And then it also, probably the biggest draw, and it can be a little unfortunate if you're on the wrong end of it, is Jirachi's ability Serene Grace. And so Serene Grace makes it so that your Iron Heads are flinching more than half the time, which can be very, very painful if you're on the receiving end of it. So I've never gotten to use Jirachi, and it's one of those mons that I've always sort of seen in use and have been on the wrong end of. So I'm really looking forward to building around it and using it. So yeah, going into the second round, I was really hoping that Sylveon would be still there. I used Sylveon in my run in the Season 2 of TBA, and I was really comfortable with it. The calking was sort of straightforward for me, and just had a lot of interesting tech, and I like the move pool. It also is a Wish Passer, great special defense wall, and so I was really looking forward to potentially pairing Sylveon with Jirachi. However, Sylveon got taken in the first round, and so luckily I had sort of a 1B to Sylveon. My plan was it was a 1A, 1B, but Sylveon, and that mon was Togekiss. So Togekiss really supports Jirachi well, or they support each other well, actually, because the Steel and Poison type attacks that Togekiss doesn't want to take, Jirachi either resists or is immune to, and the ground type attacks that Jirachi doesn't want to be in on, Togekiss can switch in and it's immune because it's flying type. So yeah, fairy flying type. The second of the three of my Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Also another Wish Passer, which is again really nice. My original plan was to have this sort of triple Wish passing core. Unfortunately, that did not happen, but that's okay. Yeah, and Togekiss has two really great abilities in Serene Grace as well. So sort of created a flinch core, if you will, and I think a lot of people sort of rolled their eyes when they saw this pick because I'd already taken Jirachi, and now Togekiss to pair it up is just flinching is going to happen in my games this season, for better or worse. And Togekiss's other ability is also sort of a RNG, tilting the RNG into its favor with Super Luck, which makes it more likely to get crits. So yeah, I think Togekiss was a very good add on this team. Supports Jirachi very well and really appreciates Jirachi's presence also. So going into round 3, I wanted to get something that continued to add to the bulk of my team. By practice, I'm a bulky offensive player, so I really don't like frail Pokemon. I just can't use them. So the next Pokemon that I drafted was Porygon 2. So Porygon 2 is incredibly bulky as long as it has its Eviolite. With the NatDex format, there's everything, or not everything, but there are tons of mons with knockoff, so have to be cognizant of that. But I think Porygon 2 really fits well here because I have the fighting resist with Togekiss, and Jirachi is not... Jirachi being my steel type, it's not weak to fighting because it's also psychic type. So that really helped to contribute to this pick. I was like, okay, I can take Porygon here and take Porygon 2 here and feel comfortable. Porygon 2 has some interesting abilities. It's most commonly used, at least in singles, is Trace, copying the ability of the Pokemon across from it. But Download and Analytic are also very good. Porygon 2 has access to Trick Room. It has access to multiple status moves with Thunder Wave and Toxic. It also has access to Teleport, which got a huge buff, becoming -6 in priority, which allows you to get your Trick Room sweepers in for free. So that was really nice. Having that very slow pivot was something that I thought was pretty valuable. Yeah, and it also just gets a very interesting amount of special coverage. So really excited to use Porygon. Haven't really used Porygon much since I've started getting into singles more. It was more of it was a staple on a lot of my doubles VGC teams. So in 2017. So yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to get back into it. Alright, so the next Mon in round 4, I was really hoping, as I mentioned earlier, to get my triple Wish core, and the Mon in that core was supposed to be Vaporeon. However, Vaporeon went a couple of picks after I took Porygon 2, and it kind of sent me into a little bit of a scramble. Looking on the board, I noticed there were a lot of Tier 2s off the board. I mean, I was contributing to that as well, taking Porygon 2 and Togekiss, but there was one more Tier 2 on my draft board, and I knew that I really needed to grab it now, or else it was probably going to fall off the board. And that Mon is Krookodile. So Krookodile is a Mon I've always wanted to use. I have never actually gotten the opportunity to use it. It's always just been right out of my reach. Like, I always feel like people draft Krookodile a few picks before I was going to. And Krookodile is really nice because not only is it Intimidate support, it also has the ability to potentially sweep with Moxie. It's solid Scarfer, base 92 speed, and it is an offensive Dark type. And Dark types are a little harder to come by in, like, generally speaking. So I think Krookodile being one of the better Dark types in the format, I really wanted to prioritize picking it up. It also, I mean, it fits a nice speed tier for me, and it's also a ground type, so it gives me sort of 2 immunities with an immunity to electric and also the immunity to psychic. So yeah, and this is also a post DLC league. I should have mentioned that previously, and so Krookodile getting access to things like close combat now are just phenomenal. So alright, so now that I got Krookodile, I was looking at the board again, and it's going back, and it's starting to come back to me, and I'm thinking, okay, Vaporeon's gone. I got 4 of the mons that were already on my draft plan. Next, I need to sort of pivot and now get a water type, because they're going fast, and the board is starting to thin out, and I just wasn't willing to take the risk. And so I started looking around, and I was like, oh wow, there was one mon in particular, a tier 1 mon, that I was very surprised was still on the board. And so I said, you know, I'm already planning on getting a tier 3 Mega. Like, I'd already used 240 of my 400 points, but I knew that I was already planning on getting a tier 3 Mega, so I'd have an extra 60 points. So I really had 220 points to play around with. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead. And this mon is incredible value at this point, so I went and I took Tapu Fini. So I did something that I don't usually do, which is I try to avoid doubling up on typing. So doubling up on the fairy typing, Tapu Fini being fairy water and Togekiss being fairy flying. However, with Tapu Fini, I just got incredible value. I mean, the other Tapus who all set their own respective terrains all went in the top 10 or 11. Tapu Fini did not, mainly because it didn't get the buffs in terms of like moves that some of the other Tapus did, with Tapu Koko and Tapu Bulu getting things like Play Rough and Close Combat, and Tapu Lele just being allowed, as in Gen 7 draft, Tapu Lele was incredibly broken. Tapu Fini just kind of is the forgotten Tapu, which is really interesting because two things that Misty Terrain, which Tapu Fini sets on entry, do is cuts dragon attacks in half, the damage of dragon attacks in half, and then it also, or for anything that's grounded, and then it also stops status, which I thought was very useful for my team, as I mentioned, like, Porygon 2 is very bulky. One of the ways to try to get rid of Porygon 2 is to status it, typically toxic. So I wanted to make sure that was it was the case that Tapu Fini would be able to support the rest of my team, which it does very well. The one thing that I will say is one of the old common strategies for both Jirachi and Togekiss is sort of like para flinch, where you Thunder Wave something and then continue to flinch it because there's a higher chance of it not being able to move. So if I did ever want to go down that road, I would want to make sure that I sort of have to play around my own Misty Terrain, but that's okay. I'm aware of that, and yeah, so I think Tapu Fini was a great pickup. It's incredibly bulky. It also has access to Defog, which hazard removal was a little lacking, so kind of go and we'll be able to be more flexible. Togekiss doesn't have to run Defog ever, if like all the time, if ever, rather. So yeah. Okay, so my next pick, I really wanted to get a fast mon, and so the mon that I chose to get was Crobat. So Crobat hitting base 130 speed, it just hit a speed tier that I absolutely needed. I needed something over base 100 that was basically able to potentially speed creep some of the much faster megas. I mean, things like Mega Alakazam and Mega Lopunny and Mega Aerodactyl and all of those things. Like, being able to potentially speed creep those with Scarf is really nice, and just being able to outspeed a lot of threats that are under base 130 is just very nice. And Crobat also gives me another Defogger, which is also huge. Like, having a third defogger to get rid of any hazards was really nice. So, and plus I've just never really used this mon. Like Crobat, something, I mean, everyone knows of Zubat and Golbat just being kind of really annoying in the games because they're everywhere in all of the caves. But Crobat's actually a really good mon. It gets a lot of different coverage, and it's pretty versatile. So, really excited to use this. Alright, so the next mon that I picked up was actually a kind of a steal, in my opinion. I really wanted to, as we're halfway through the draft, I wanted to make sure that I got to start picking things that I thought were really high value. And I think starting with the Tapu Fini pick, that was the case. Like, Tapu Fini in round 5 was incredible value. I thought Crobat was solid value, getting it where I did. But this mon here, I thought was just like, I mean, for where it's tiered, I thought that it was one of the better mons in its tier, and getting it towards the back half of the draft, I was very excited. That mon is Regirock. So Regirock is incredibly bulky. It has, at least physically, has a base 200 defense stat. That's like one of the highest in all of the format, and rock typing isn't actually that bad. It actually goes really well with the team that I have, just because, I mean, I only had one Stealth Rocker in Krookodile. It can't be status. It also has a pretty high, Regirock also has a pretty high attack stat. It's only base 50 speed, so it can function in Trick Room, which Porygon can set for it, and get it out safely. But the biggest thing about Regirock was actually some of the moves that it got from DLC. It gets Body Press as well as Heavy Slam, and I think those two moves sort of give it the coverage that it needs to function as a pretty good mon. So, I mean, Body Press especially, like base 200 defense Body Press. Oh man, that is scary. So, yeah, I was really excited about Regirock, and sort of my next pick was to kind of cover that up, like cover up Regirock, some of Regirock's weaknesses, being rock type, weak to ground, weak to water, weak to grass. So I was like, okay, and also weak to fighting. I was like, all right, we should go ahead and get the sort of a bulky grass type, one that kind of does a lot. And so the next pick was Gogo, which a lot of people know Gogo as just like one of the travel Pokemon in Pokemon X and Y. Honestly, that's what I knew it as for a long time. I didn't realize it had viability until I faced one, and it was like, wow, this thing's bulky. It gets recovery with Milk Drink. It can set up with Swords Dance. Wow, this is incredibly annoying. It also has Sap Sipper, which gives it gives the team a grass immunity. So I figured with Tapu Fini and with Regirock, and with Krookodile, I was like, oh, okay, like having a grass immunity, that's pretty solid. And it fit a speed tier I didn't have. It's base 68 speed, which is close enough to the base 70, and it's still over base 60. So yeah, I was really interested to see Gogo. Or I'm really interested to see Gogo in action. I think it's pretty good value for tier 5, so I was pretty happy. All right, the next pick was a mon that it's one of my favorites. Gen 2. It's always been just a mon that I thought looked really cool. It has very interesting typing. I've went through multiple games. I mean, I went through Gen 2 with it. I went through Gen 4 with it. It's such an awesome mon. Heracross. So I feel like Heracross gets overlooked a lot. I mean, it got a Mega, so a lot of people sort of use the Mega because it has Skill Link, and the plan typically is like, oh yeah, use Mega Heracross in Trick Room, or use it with webs, with Sticky Web. And I think that Mega Heracross is great, and it's very bulky, and I mean, it hits very hard, but I really think that regular Heracross still is very good and just kind of gets slept on. It has access to two incredible abilities with Guts as well as Moxie. So with Guts, I mean, that's just another, on top of Tapu Fini, that's another deterrent for bringing status against this team. And with Moxie, that gives yet another potential Moxie sweeper with pairing Krookodile and Heracross. And I think this team really just kind of complements Heracross well. I think that was kind of the plan the whole time. It was like, try to get Heracross into a good situation. I think the speed tier is a little unfortunate. Like having Tapu Fini, I wasn't expecting to get Tapu Fini, so they share a speed tier. But I think generally speaking, the team speed tiers are balanced enough that we don't really have to worry too much about that. But we'll see what happens. One of the goals, I was talking to a couple of people, and I was just like, I love Heracross so much. I want to get it. I want to make it a kill leader. Like, can we get Heracross into the top 3 in kills for this season? It's going to be a challenge, I know. There's a lot of great coaches and a lot of incredibly scary teams, but that's the hope. Okay, so we're coming towards the tail end of the draft. I knew what my last pick was going to be. There was only, at this point in the draft, there was only one other team that didn't have a Mega drafted, and based on the composition of their team, I didn't think that they were taking a Mega. At least they weren't taking the Mega that I was looking at, rather. Sorry. So I knew I had to pick up my last free slot. And that last free slot ended up being Rapidash. So Rapidash gives 3 very important things to this team. 1, it gives Flash Fire. Flash Fire is awesome because there's a little bit of a fire weakness here with both Heracross, Gogo, and Jirachi. So having something that gives yet another immunity, that's really useful. The second thing that Rapidash gives is a base 105 speed stat. I needed something in between Crobat and Jirachi. I think that was key, and that was very clear, in my opinion. The worst thing would have been only having Crobat and Jirachi and sort of giving the ability to speed creep Jirachi by a few points, and then also have the ability to invest in bulk. And that's, I mean, when you have great coaches, that's what's going to happen. Like, everyone's going to be running crazy sets and running crazy calcs and speed creeping everything. So you need to make sure that the speed tiers are as good as they possibly can be, especially for a draft this deep. And the third thing is that Rapidash is a fire type and completes my fire, water, grass core. And I mean, with Gogo and Tapu Fini, they're more on the defensive / physically defensive, or specially defensive sides, respectively. And Rapidash is more of an offensive threat. And I think in Tier 5, there's some value there. So I was really excited about that. And then for my last pick, I actually went with Mega Ampharos. Sorry. So, yeah, Mega Ampharos. So, Mega Ampharos is really, really underrated. This Mon is incredibly slow, base 45 speed, but its base 165 special attack is just wow. Like, I mean, it operates as a Trick Room sweeper with that massive special stat, and Porygon can get it out for free and make sure that it comes in safely. It also can set up. I mean, it has access to agility, and again, not a lot of things want to take a hit from a base 165 special attacker. So I think that really helps the team. And then on top of that, it just like it completes my Fairy Dragon Steel Core, and it's also a slow Volt Switch pivot, which is great because again, it's a situation where Mega Emperors can take a hit and then get something else out that like do damage to something, and then get something else out that like really can swing momentum in my favor and really push. But yeah, so that is the team. I want to give a special shout out to all of the people in TBA. We had a great draft. Especially, really want to give a shout out to the admins. They've been great, and they were key in making sure that the draft went smooth. Shout out to the other streamers in TBA. I'll be linking out their YouTube links in the description below. I mean, I started to see a lot of people do this, and I decided, hey, maybe I should give this a try. So they've been my motivation, and I can't thank them enough. They've been incredibly supportive, and they're all looking forward to seeing this video. So thanks for tuning in, and I really appreciate the support. Hopefully I'll have more content for you at a later date. All right, thanks.